Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa, host of the Propcast and co-founder of LMRE, the global PropTech recruitment and search consultancy. In this podcast, we'll explore how the digital evolution of the real estate industry is impacting the property market. The aim of each episode is to introduce you to a PropTech innovator and discuss how their work has created a shift in focus when it comes down to digitizing the built environment. If you're interested in finding out more about PropTech or applying for a job in this space, or keen to know who the big players are that are moving and shaking the real estate industry up, we have you covered, and we will be bringing you an episode each week to connect you to the VCs, PropTech startups, and real estate professionals from around the globe. Also, a big shout out to our sponsors of the podcast, ReamTech and Pretech, who you will hear from during the episode. Today on the Propcast, we will be discovering how to make warehouses smart. And who better to talk about this than co-founders of Saltbox, Tyler Scriven and Maxwell. So welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, Lucy. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So on this podcast, we will explore the future of warehouses and logistics, how to attract talent to this new part of real estate, and we'll hear more about Saltbox's mission, their expansion, and I guess how they're going to be growing across all 50 states. For those listening not familiar with our guest, Tyler is currently the founder and chief executive officer of Saltbox, which is a venture-backed startup building workspace and logistics infrastructure to power the future of e-commerce. Saltbox was founded in 2019 and is on a rapid growth trajectory, which we're going to hear so much more about later. Prior to this, Tyler served as the founding managing director of the well-known Techstars, a global early-stage venture capital investment fund. At Techstars, he led investments in dozens of early-stage startups. And we are also being joined by Maxwell, who is another co-founder of Saltbox. He currently is leading all the aspects of the member lifecycle and product. And prior to that, Maxwell helped build the customer experience and bionic operations teams at Full Story and was part of the leadership team in the research and operations departments at Bridgewater Associates. And so I'm delighted to have you both on the podcast today. So without further ado, let's start the show. And why don't we begin with how you both got into this space? And Tyler, you can talk us through, you came from banking into scaling another business that I'm probably pronouncing this wrong, Palantir Technologies, to over 2,000 people. So how to get from that to warehouses? Yeah, talk me through it.
Yeah, that's a good question. How do I get from Silicon Valley to a warehouse? Lots of adventure. I think the first thing I would say, Louis, is that as a kid, I was an entrepreneur very early on and did a lot of really gritty things. And my parents had to convince me to go to college. And I wanted to stay home. And, I've always had a appreciation and an affinity for small business as opposed perhaps to the world I lived in for a while of venture capital funded company. In 2016, decided to move to Atlanta and to buy a small business myself, and really with the intention of putting myself back in those shoes and with some fresh eyes and hopefully identifying some new opportunities. And that's exactly what happened. And that was the origin story of Saltbox, which maybe we can get into more as we go.
Yeah. And Maxwell, what about you? And how did you guys first meet?
Yeah, good question. So Tyler and I are actually coming up on our 20th anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
Terrifying.
And it's, we actually met the first year of university at the University of Virginia, and have had like these very parallel paths ever since. Reconnected 5 years ago in Atlanta. We both moved to Atlanta, Tyler from San Fran, me from New York.
Yeah.
And in reconnecting, sort of, we just said, like, there's something here. We want to eventually have the opportunity to work together. And personally, I'm drawn to really hard problems that have a big impact. And when Tyler first brought this idea and said, I'm thinking about solving this problem, I was like, there's no reason no one solved it. And it's because it's really hard to do, but there's the opportunity here. And if I have the opportunity to build a great company with someone I want to spend my life with, let's do it.
Okay, now let's hear from both of you, and Tyler, go first. Talk us through the Saltbox sort of product. I'm sure it's changed over time. Like, run me through it.
Well, yeah, I guess I'd have to start with, what is the problem, that we're solving, and I'll share that just through the lens through which I experienced it, and then eventually kind of rationalized it. As I mentioned, in 2016, I purchased a small business, a consumer product goods retail company, and my goal was to evolve that company from being primarily a retail distribution strategy to primarily e-commerce distribution strategy. And I thought to myself that I could use, all of the best in class software that exists now to do that. You think about Shopify and Stripe and Facebook, MailChimp and these sorts of products. And that turned out to be true. Those technologies are really effective, and which shows in their adoption and growth. But I also encountered this kind of ugly dark side of digital commerce, which was, having to source all of the goods, having to store the goods, having to move the goods, having to employ people to deal with all of the logistics, the operations, the physical aspects of that business are really what, shaped my experience. And what I found effectively was that I, along with millions of other smaller e-commerce entrepreneurs, were kind of pushed to the fringes of the real estate ecosystem, and implicitly also pushed to the fringes of the entrepreneurial ecosystem at large, because we were forced to work in basements and garages and self-storage facilities, and, in some sense, treated as second-class entrepreneurs in a world that principally focused on what was happening on the internet. But, there is this simple reality, which is that, e-commerce begins and ends in the physical world. It will always be that way until we move to, purely digital products, right? And someone has to deal with that. And, if you are a big company, you can afford to invest the capital and effort to build out the logistics infrastructure that you need to, operate efficiently.
Like the Amazons of the world.
Correct.
Yeah.
And by the way, even my son, who's 6, even he understands that, it's Amazon's logistics. He wouldn't use that word, but he understands it's Amazon's logistics, which shape that company because he sees all of their trucks, So they have the resources, but for the other half of the curve, right, they don't have those resources. Yeah. And so in effect, what we're doing is we are creating access to this critical logistics infrastructure, which begins with physical space, right? Logistics begins with a warehouse, plain and simple. Sometimes you need a 1 million square foot warehouse. Sometimes you need a 1,000 square foot warehouse, but it all begins there. So we're creating access to that infrastructure, and we're doing that in a way that reflects the fact that our primary user, that merchant, is a human, right? And they need these spaces and these services designed in a very different way than we've historically thought about logistics in this country or in the world for that matter. And we refer to that kind of very basic ideas, human-centric logistics. And so you could, summarize it to say that what we're doing is we are creating access to critical logistics infrastructure, that is a workspace, all of the, surrounding services and activities. And we're doing that in a way that makes it very, very approachable, very accessible by a normal person, but without any sort of meaningful trade-offs to the efficiency or productivity of those tools.
Here is a message from our sponsor, Michael Beckerman from CreTech.
Hey, this is Michael Beckerman from CreTech. I'm here to invite you to check out CreTech Plus, the first streaming platform devoted to innovation and technology in the built world, featuring new weekly videos from the world's leading real estate and tech professionals. The first month of streaming is absolutely free, and then you could use the code LMRE to receive 25% off your second month. To learn more, visit plus.cretech.com.
Where did you kick off your first warehouse in Atlanta? How's it grown so far?
Maxwell. Sure. So we decided the best way to start this is do it in our backyards.
Yeah.
Right. There's for a couple of reasons. A, it's just easier because we live there. We can easier manage it, but also Atlanta has this thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem. And so we wanted to, part of the hypothesis is there's lots of the entrepreneurs that need a space to grow and a place to sort of either start or build or scale their e-commerce business. And so let's build a home for them. And so we launched the first one. It opened right after Thanksgiving of 2019. And within 3 months, we were at capacity right before COVID. So we saw this amazing sort of just need and draw to what we were building. And so it was awesome. And then, we had this period where we were nervous, right? Everybody was nervous in March 2020. And very quickly we realized, no, what's actually happening during this period of during the pandemic was this exponential growth in adoption of digital commerce, right? When people were just buying more online because they weren't leaving their homes. That was like gasoline on the fire, what we were already seeing, which was this growth in e-commerce and growth in these startups who had the ability to reach their target customers directly with an idea. An idea became a product and they needed a place to sort of take that product and deliver it to their customers. And then we've been riding that wave ever since, which has been very humbling.
Yeah. Congratulations. And so where have you further grown then? What states are you in?
Yeah. So we are in Dallas and Seattle live right now. So Dallas launched in March of 2021. Seattle officially opened actually yesterday. Awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Dallas is already at capacity in under 5 months. which is again, just, it shows the sort of like, the market's like, I need a place to go do this. And we just have the privilege of building the purpose-built space for them to do that.
No, to do that, Dallas is more than 2 times the size of our first location in Atlanta.
Amazing. Okay, so you've also launched, I think, a new part of your product called Saltbox Fulfillment. Run me through that part of the product.
Yeah, I cut Maxwell off there. I apologize. Atlanta, Dallas, and Seattle are open today. We have locations opening this year in Los Angeles, in Denver, and also a couple of new locations in existing cities as well. So we're, doubling down on growth already. Saltbox Fulfillment, in order to best answer that question, I just have to step back for a moment and speak about, kind of how we think about solving problems for our members and the scope of that. And that is to say that we want to be, over time, their, go-to solution to solve the entirety of their logistics and operations problems. We think about, our business, our capabilities as being kind of firmly rooted in the physical space, and any problem in the physical world and any problem that kind of emerges out of that is, within the purview of things that we believe we can solve for that customer. And so, you think about a wide range of logistics needs, but even potentially, capital needs or supply chain needs. Fulfillment is an interesting one, an important one, because they are a subset of companies for whom coming to Saltbox and getting a 500 or 5,000 square foot warehouse suite and leveraging our elastic workforce and our loading docks and pallet jacks and all these sort of things, that is the right approach for them to managing their fulfillment or operations.
Yeah.
And there are other customers for whom outsourcing that activity is the right approach. Obviously, when we talk about Saltbox offering fulfillment as a service, we're talking about the latter group, those for whom outsourcing is the right solution. And the reality is, though, that kind of spectrum of need, if you will, is very, very nuanced. Knowing what is the right solution for me and my business at this time is a hard question to answer. And a lot of times, companies just get that wrong. One of the kind of underlying reasons why they get it wrong is because historically they've had limited choice. That is to say that it has not been a choice to get your own 1,000 square foot warehouse suite and do it yourself in a highly leveraged environment, right? The choice has been, well, do it out of, my garage or outsource to a 3PL. And in outsourcing through a 3PL, there often is a kind of mismatch, essentially, of scale there. A small business seeking to work with a very large 3PL is challenging. Incentive structure of that 3PL is just not aligned to meet the needs of that small business. And so our solution is really kind of premised on that problem. And whereas your typical 3PL is operating out of a 250,000 square foot facility and shipping, 20,000 outbound packages per day, a Saltbox fulfillment hub is embedded within a Saltbox. It is by definition very small, but in a way that allows for that product to meet that small business where they are. Instead of having to ship your inventory across the country into a building you've never been to, you can drive it down the street. Instead of having to wait on hold to talk to the customer service team who will eventually try to problem solve what happened to your order, you can talk directly to the operations manager at Saltbox Dallas, and so on and so forth. And so that is really the starting point of that offering. And we think that it creates a lot of opportunity for us to grow alongside our customers as they scale.
Yeah, it sounds a lot more efficient and less sort of fragmented. Now, what about, talk me through, what have you, obviously talk from what you've taken from your data. What major trends have you seen over, obviously we touched on it a bit with obviously COVID, obviously more delivery sort of happening, but are there any sort of trends you've seen over the past 5 years, and any predictions in terms of warehouses and logistics? Maxwell, maybe could be one for you.
Sure. So I say, like, the highest level, one of the things we are seeing is sort of the demographics and firmographics of who our customer base is. And that's reflecting the changing dynamics of sort of like who are big business owners, right? We're seeing them as a lot more of like sort of people who have been traditionally sort of to the fringes of like building their own sort of capital and like able to control their own enterprise, right? We're seeing that it's more heavily indexed with more women as founders of these companies, and more heavily indexed on people and persons of color, right? And sort of, where traditionally you see something like 70-80% sort of like white males, we see like a more of a 50-50 split, which is very interesting, right? It like goes to this general hypothesis, or there's a lot of entrepreneurs who just haven't had that place to like sort of be supported and grow. And so that's a big part of one of the drivers. On the logistics side, our third co-founder, Paul, was able to join us today. He's had this theory for a while. We're seeing it true, that traditional logistics was in these large increments, right? These 40-foot containers going across ships that had millions of them. However, like the world's going where logistics needs to be enabled in smaller and smaller increments and faster cycle times. All right. So like it's hyperlocal. It's like really focused on getting things from point A to point B, and point A to point B is a few miles away as opposed to, hundreds of thousands of miles. And so that means that you just need, the infrastructure needs to sort of change to enable smaller and smaller increments of logistics activity. And that's a big part of what we're seeing, right? Where our locations are like sort of nodes in this greater infrastructure.
Yep.
That we are sort of enabling logistics in smaller increments, right? Businesses have smaller footprints. You can have lower volume of packages. You can sort of have last mile delivery. So you have like last mile pickup, all coming out of a Saltbox.
Yeah. Did you know that the average cost of making a bad hire in the real estate market is £60,000? Or if you're listening to us from the US, that's $83,000. Finding out an employee is moving on is never great news, but sadly, it's unavoidable. The cost of hiring so high, it's important to get it right the first time round. So if you're struggling to find the right candidates, why not consider working with a recruitment agency? We're experts at finding the right people to fill roles. And because we already have a database to hand, we can speed up the process too. So head to lmre.tech to brief us on your next hire. And we spoke about trends. It's obviously more sort of women founders going to these businesses. Talking about specifically your team, you guys obviously, how do you attract talent to warehouse and logistics, maybe more female talent, something too? I don't think of it being as particularly sort of sexy as an industry. I understand the growth of it, the investment, the money to be earned as well. But in terms of like your team culture diversity, how have you sort of gone about that, guys?
Yeah, I mean, well, you noted it, Louisa, but it begins with the customer here. And, the simple fact is that women are, as well, by the way, as Black and brown people are disproportionately represented in our membership, in our customer base. And that's not because of anything that we've done in particular. I think that is a reflection of, some broader systemic issues or perhaps opportunities. That, this is where those groups find the best outlet to pursue their entrepreneurial passions, right? Perhaps because they have fewer opportunities elsewhere. And so, we will lean into that. And what I would say in response to that is that I want to make sure that whomever is walking the doors of Saltbox is able to pursue the building of their business with the most leverage possible, right? And that is a fundamental issue here. Is the issue is not that pursuing a venture-backed company is inherently better. I don't think it particularly is. The issue is that we need to address is that when one pursues a business like the sort of businesses that are built at Saltbox, they often are doing so without operational leverage in a way that's going to help them to grow faster and achieve their goals. And so, we want to solve that. You asked about how do we attract, diverse talent to Saltbox. I don't know. I'm very, very, as someone who's dealt with this my whole life, I'm very hesitant to say we're great at it. I don't know that we are. The facts are the facts. Obviously, as a founding team of essentially 3 minorities, like we're a pretty unique founding team. And I think that we are building a culture that is attractive to a diverse array of people. If you ask me, the key to that, if we are doing well, is to treat everyone the same.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not rocket science. But again, I think, this is obviously something that oftentimes in the past, Maxwell and I have been kind of put in the seat of say, hey, Maxwell, why don't you work on making XYZ company more diverse, and now we kind of have that mandate for ourselves. And our strategy is first and foremost, treat everyone equally.
Yeah. And what Tyler mentioned there is key, right? There's having a mission it's not about warehousing. Warehousing is the means to the end, right? So you have this attractive mission there's a story that people want to be a part of. And then you have internally a culture where people feel supported and feel that they can be themselves. We talk a lot about self-awareness, talk a lot about vulnerability as like key tenets of our culture. And those are like sort of like the little kernels of a culture that people can feel comfortable. And sort of like with that, we can attract the right people who want to be part of us achieving our ambitious mission.
Well, talking about your ambitious mission, you also recently announced, I think it was your Series A, was something like over 10 million or something like that. What are any sort of big plans you have with that? Obviously, further expansion to other states, but what's ahead of you for 2021, 2022, guys?
Yeah, what's not ahead,
Love that.
As you noted, we completed Series A earlier this year in February, $10.5 billion Series A. And that celebration ended the day after it started and,
Yeah.
went back to work. And so we've got a lot going on. I mean, we will end this year with 7 or 8 open Saltboxes across the country with a robust pipeline that, will result in, well more than double-digit growth next year. We believe that, we'll be building Saltbox workspaces for, many, many years to come. And a lot of our focus, the things that we stress about, if you will, are first and foremost is hiring, and continuing to attract really smart people that are independently passionate about the problems that we're solving and want to be a part of that. And secondarily is around, continuing to innovate, not just with respect to, the workspace product, but also our solutions business. It was very important to us to begin to build the business beyond the workspace offering very early. And I'm excited to say that, even in these early days, we are already seeing revenue contribution from non-workspace activities that is, well into the double digits, and so it's a healthy foundation for us to begin to work from. But we're moving quickly. We are building a product and engineering teams. We are advancing fulfillment and we have a number of other solutions in the pipeline, and we'll continue to push very aggressively on those things.
Awesome. Well, no, I'm looking forward to following your growth throughout the years to come. Who knows? Maybe you guys will expand to UK. I know we've got the same problem over here.
Yeah, we'll definitely be in the UK. No doubt. I don't, probably not next year, but I would say start looking out for us in other places in 2023. But you're right. The problem exists for sure.
Everywhere.
Look, I think that we can build a very big business. And one thing that I'll share with you, and I just think it's so fascinating and to some extent reflects on our opportunity, is about a year ago, Bessemer, the venture fund, published their Shopify Series A deal memo. And it's a really interesting read. And to my mind, the most notable part of that is that they also share their exit multiple table, which every, deal includes. What do we expect the outcome to be here? And the highest order outcome that they could imagine at that time, which was in 2010, was a $400 million valuation for Shopify, which, in their own words, reflected them achieving essentially market dominance in the world of e-commerce, including, penetration into medium and large enterprises. What's interesting about that is that, Shopify today is a $190 billion public company, not a $400 million company. And so, it really tells you something to some extent about our ability as humans to predict the future, but more specifically, about our ability to appreciate the impact and scale of the sort of transformation that is happening in our economy today, right? And that is a transformation from an analog retail economy to a digital one. It's one thing to be off by 10 times. It's another to be off by, 10,000 times, right? And we are. And so I think as we think about, the future of logistics, and in particular, the future of logistics for small companies, we believe in essence that, as Maxwell said, this is something that every company will need in the future, and they'll need it in a way that is, much more humanized, a much smaller scale, much more flexible, much more approachable. And that's really the vision that guides us. And we think that in a world in which there is some trillion-ish dollars worth of market cap of companies that are enabling things to be sold online today, that, surely there's a few tens of billions at least, for companies that enable those things to get to where they're going. And that's, exactly where we're focused.
Well, you're in a very good space. That's all I can say, guys.
Hi, this is Nelson from Property Quants. I'd like to invite you to join our Introduction to Data Science and Machine Learning for Real Estate seminar. To learn more, visit propertyquants.com/seminar and use special code LMRE20 on Eventbrite for a discount.
Unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the podcast, but how we end it is with the LMRE part. So Maxwell, why don't you start off with, the lessons learned, then we go into mention any one product, give someone a shout out. R is, what's the most rewarding part of working in PropTech, or specifically you could say warehouse and logistics. And E is what you're most excited about in the future of PropTech. So yeah, let's start me off with what's the biggest lesson you've learned in your career? Big question.
I think the biggest thing I've learned, and I learned it a lot at Full Story and deeply applying it here, is obsess about what are the problems that your customers are having, right? And like, if you obsess about them, that'll be your guiding light to building the right thing.
Yeah.
And it's not like what's right in front of them, but like, what is the root of their problem? And if you address the root of it, you can then solve that at scale for lots of different people. So,
yeah. Okay, right. What about Anyone you want to give a shout out to, or maybe a product or service?
Oh man, this is hard. How are we getting paid for this? No, I would say I'm on the spot for this one. I'm very interested in what's happening with like headless commerce. So I'm not going to name ones particularly, but like just this world on the digital side, enabling commerce to happen, whether it's things like drop parties or things like sort of just like, brandless sort of like back-end enablement of e-commerce. That's a very interesting world that'll help shape this new adoption of digital commerce.
Okay. Now we got what's the most rewarding part of working in PropTech other than working with Tyler?
The 100 other Tylers that we could, well, maybe not 100 other Tylers, but we have the privilege of like, trying to attract, but then like choosing the smartest, most passionate people to work with. Every day, like when I wake up, I'm like, I have to be on my A game because we have people out to the table who are like every day are like, we're pushing to do something awesome, and they get me up early in the morning.
Awesome. Okay. And last but not least, we've got the E. What are you most excited about?
Oh, I'm most excited. So everybody laughs at me. I'm most excited about getting to like 10,000 actual customers who we can like help change their world. Right? That's like this number I keep in my head. And we're like the problem is that large, and that's just a small subset of the total number of entrepreneurs who need to be logistically enabled. And so like that's what drives me, like get to that number so that we're like changing logistics in the United States.
Yeah. Well, when that happens, I'm coming out to Atlanta to celebrate with you guys.
I'm there now.
Right, Tyler, over to you.
Main lesson is the combination of forming a long-term thesis, having a point of view on the world, and being patient. Right. That's how you build a big business, is you believe something about the future and you just work towards that. And so that's that. I've learned that lesson and feel better prepared to do that. What's the next question?
You can mention anyone or product or something.
I two won't name names, but I'm very fascinated and kind of, I'd say, bullish on, modular construction. I think another decade or so from now, many of those companies will change the way that we think about physical spaces and our capacity to create them quickly and cost effectively and wherever we want them to exist. And so I'm excited about that.
The third one is, what's your most rewarding part of working in PropTech?
It's hard to say working in PropTech, the most rewarding part of the work in general is the satisfaction of hearing someone tell us that we really solved the problem for them. I'll tell you very briefly, I talked to a customer last week who described that she, before Saltbox, working out of a self-storage facility in which there was she described it, a vagrant who, had rented the unit next to hers, and it made it very, very uncomfortable, and so she was quite happy to be at Saltbox.
Finally, what are you most excited about the future of, I guess, what you guys are doing?
I share in Maxwell's thought there. I have this image in my head, this vision of putting together some really kind of thoughtful, interactive narrative piece around our first 1,000 customers and showing the world we see, which is, this incredible mix of small businesses and their stories, and every single one of which is really, really interesting. And I want to tell those stories in a good way.
Awesome. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. But unfortunately, we have come to the end of the Propcast. Thank you both, Maxwell and Tyler, for joining me. I'm looking forward to catching up with you after the show. Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our guests and our sponsors, Cretech and Reentech. Make sure you visit our website, lmre.tech, where you can subscribe to our newsletter, keep up with our industry news and events, or if you're looking for your next career move, it's all on there. The Propcast can be found on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube, where all good content is found. Whilst we're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate it if you could spread the word and tell a friend about it, or even write us a review. And I'll catch you next week.